our weekly Chairman's Update. For the past several weeks, we've been going through the 2024 Washington State Republican Party platform, section by section, talking about the content of each of the platform sections and some of what it means in practical terms this year and in the current political environment here in Washington. Today, I want to talk about sections 8 and 9 of the state party platform. Section 8 covers sound fiscal policy, a heavy focus on our tax policy and tax codes here in Washington. And Section 9 is economic opportunity, which touches on some fiscal policies, tax policies as well, but takes a broader look at economic health and of the state and of the individuals living here in the state. So, as I said, Section 8 on sound fiscal policy really focuses on taxes and budgets in our state. And as I've said before, the traditional tax structure in Washington state has been a so-called three-legged stool, three main types of tax here in Washington state that fund the state government. And those are property tax, sales tax, and then a business tax that we call the business and occupation or B&O tax. Those are the three main types of tax that generate revenue into the state's the budgets. And what we've had in recent years is a really aggressive move on the part of some of my legislative colleagues in Olympia, and especially the governor and the executive office holders in Olympia, to add other kinds of taxes, to add new taxes to that three-legged stool. And of course, two of the high-profile new taxes just in the last few years were the very controversial state capital gains excise tax, a tax which has been through the court system. Basically, our state has created a fiction that here in Washington, capital gains are an excise tax. A capital gains tax is an excise tax. Everywhere else in the world where there is a capital gains tax, it's considered an income tax. And the federal government, the IRS, considers capital gains an income tax. But here in Washington, we've created this legal fiction that it's an excise tax, a tax on a transaction. And that tax remains controversial. It's also very volatile. It's hard to model or predict. And we're suffering from that a little bit lately as the revenue generated by the state capital gains tax has plummeted, frankly, as people of wealth are either moving out of the state or moving their resources, their money, into places where the tax does not apply. So it's not a good idea. It's not good sound fiscal policy. Another recent tax, of course, even more controversial, is the cap and trade tax scheme. And yes, the Climate Commitment Act cap and trade scheme is a tax. The trial court in Thurston County State Court has ruled it such, clarified that it is. And both of these new taxes really have put great hardship on the people of Washington. They've generated money to the state capital, but the three-legged stool, the three standard types of tax, have been generating solid revenue to the state anyway. So these new taxes really are just adding surplus. They're not needed to cover our basic functions of government, or our basic budgets in Olympia. So we would like to see a reform of these new taxes, frankly, a repeal of them, and return to our focus on the traditional three-part tax structure in Washington. Simplify that, make that a little flatter and fairer, and encourage economic growth by simplifying our taxes. Then this gets us to Section 9 of the state party platform, which is economic opportunity. Looks more generally at the health of our economy here in Washington state, which has historically been strong because we have sound fiscal policy. And by screwing that up in the last few years, we're endangering our economic opportunity. We want to see this state continue to be an incubator of new businesses, of new industries, of new wealth, of new resources. And our concern as Republicans here in Washington is that the radical left, the tax spenders in Olympia, are going to screw that up by jacking up our tax system, our budgets, growing them way too fast, and chasing business, new industry away. We've seen, the most famous episode was Amazon's founder, Jeff Bezos, relocated to Florida in part because of the tax structure here in Washington. He said it was to be closer to family, but quietly we understand it had to do with the tax structure here. And we've seen whole industries move. Fisher Investments, the big mutual fund that was based in Camas in Clark County, relocated to Texas because our fiscal house, our economic opportunity was so messed up and complicated and expensive here in Washington. And everybody, you don't have to be in mutual funds or Jeff Bezos to understand that the cost of living in Washington has gone way up. And that cramps and limits economic opportunity. And I haven't even gotten started talking about housing, how we need to reform the Growth Management Act in the state to allow for more development, more literally building more houses. Now, what can we do about all this? What can we do to protect our sound fiscal policy and ensure economic opportunity? Well, there are three things you can do coming up this November. We have three initiatives on the ballot, the general election ballot in November, that will reform our state's tax policy, protect our sound fiscal policies, and ensure economic opportunity. And those three initiatives are Initiative 2117, which will repeal the cap and trade tax scheme, and it is a tax scheme. Initiative 2109, which will repeal this controversial capital gains excise tax that's really an income tax. And Initiative 2124, which won't repeal, but will make optional, make opt-out a payroll tax, state payroll tax, that funds an insolvent so-called long-term care benefit scheme run by the state government that is insolvent and isn't a very good benefit. If you vote yes on these three initiatives, you will ensure our sound fiscal policy and continued economic opportunity. Vote yes, pay less this November. And I can't end this update without pointing out we also have Initiative 2066 that's still out gathering signatures right now that will protect choice, consumer choice, with regard to natural gas, whether you have natural gas in your kitchen to cook with or to heat your home with, which currently is under attack by the green leftists in Olympia. We encourage you to sign those initiatives, those petitions rather, for that initiative, which are still out gathering signatures now. And if that qualifies in a few weeks with enough signatures, it will also be on the ballot in November. So that's another one, 2066, to protect consumer choice with regard to natural gas. That's another one. Vote yes, pay less in your utility bills and your energy costs. Washington State Republicans are dedicated to continuing sound fiscal policy that has been a hallmark of the state and a good thing for decades. And of course, economic opportunity. Republicans are about a strong economy. These are the things that define Washington State Republicans, and we are looking forward to a robust discussion and a healthy debate on how to protect our state's fiscal policy and economic opportunity. This is our wheelhouse. This is what we do well. That's it for this week. I'll talk to you again next week where we'll look at more of our state party's platform for 2024. But until then, stay strong and be well.